Let's start with the threat environment. Given that the COVID-19 pandemic situation has lasted for the last 9 months, we would expect the threat landscape to change drastically. But has it really changed? Take the DDoS or distributed denials of service attack, for example. The security news sites SecureList reported in Q3 2020 that Q3 was not that eventful in terms of actual DDoS attacks. But New Zealand Stock Exchange was actually taken offline for several days in late August, forcing the governments to activate its national security systems. In the past 6 months, the US FBI's agency had issued 2 anti-DDoS alerts and warned of a new amplification methods being used. In any case, many of the DDoS attacks were extortionist activities. They are here to stay. What about ransomware? As recent as September 28, ZDNet reported that the French shipping line CMA CGM has been hit by a ransomware attack, closing the list of 4 biggest maritime shipping companies being hit by cyber attacks since 2017. The other 3 were APMers, taken down by the NotPetya ransomware in 2017, Costco in July 2018, and the Mediterranean Shipping Company in April this year. In the June 2020 Verizon data breach investigation report, ransomware now accounts for 27% of malware incidents, and 18% of organizations block at least one piece of ransomware. What hasn't changed is also the fact that today's cyber attacks remains industry and organization agnostic. On August 30th, 1.1 million Lazada RedMart accounts were stolen from their e-commerce platform, and a day later, 2.8 million Etigo accounts were compromised, all being sold online along with 15 other companies' stolen user data. The list goes on. If you think your business is not important and won't be a target, you should really rethink about that. Your users' data will always worth something, and your supply chains upstream and business partners and customers downstreams may also be the targets that could be exploited from your network and system connections. Common threats like distributed denial of service attacks and ransomware will continue to exploit common vulnerabilities, be it human or technical, to meet their goals, be it financial or political. So what is changing? Many things are changing. In fact, we now live in the new normal COVID-19 pandemic era. This has accelerated many organizations' digital transformation, cloud adoptions, and shifting the workplace outside of the corporate office, mixing more consumer technologies with corporate devices. As workflows move to the cloud, attackers will also do the same. Web application attacks now accounts for 43% of data breaches, doubling the number from 2019. Besides cyber security threats, there are other threats that we should pay attention to. Hardware and software failures, as well as natural disasters, have been disrupting many critical online and physical services, causing severe impact to organizations and people across the world. The list here is just a snapshot of more recent disastrous events, and these events are further forcing organizations to do something to their legacy data centers and applications, again accelerating their digital transformation plan and migrations to the cloud. As the Amazon CTO Werner Wager says, everything fails all the time. Disruptions to the systems in critical industries such as the financial services industries and the vendors that support them creates risks to stability across the industry. What we need is resilience applications that provide continuous service despite disruption. So resilience and security response share many similarities. Security is typically defined as the protections of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So without availability, security is incomplete. A system that is shut down is therefore not a secure system. Similarly, an insecure system is neither reliable nor dependable, and therefore not resilient even when available. When managing cybersecurity and operational resiliency, the basic question we must address is the risk to our business. So in its most basic form, risk is really a function of threats and vulnerabilities. If there are no threats, regardless of how many vulnerabilities or weaknesses in the systems, there is no risk. Similarly, if there is no vulnerabilities, regardless of the number of threats or types of threats we are facing, the system, which is essentially a perfect one, will exhibit no risk as well. Traditionally, when we approach the risk problem, the questions have often been centered around what can we do about it? What can we know about it in terms of its probability of occurrence, potential impact, and exploitability. This involves either a lot of guesswork or a collection of historical data. However, the past may not always inform the future when it comes to cyber threats and cybersecurity, as the technology and business environment is constantly changing. The MIT professor Nassim Taleb, who is also the author of the book Black Swan, calls such an approach training the turkey. Consider a turkey that is fed every day. Every single feeding will firm up the bird's belief that it is a general rule of life to be fed every day by their friendly members of the human race. Until the afternoon of Wednesday before Thanksgiving, something unexpected will happen to the turkey. It will then incur a revision of belief. By then, it is too late. Instead, we should focus on what we can change, which means what we can control, leverage, and influence. Going back to the risk equation, what we can change is essentially the vulnerability vector. If we have visibility of our vulnerabilities, we can fix them to reduce our exposures. If we design and build our systems for failure, again, we will reduce our exposure. We will reduce our exposures and improve resiliency. And for those vulnerabilities that we have yet to know, we can prepare ourselves to respond and recover faster and enable continuity despite disruption. Let's dive in a bit deeper into these three areas. The premise of visibility is that we can't protect if we don't know what we have. Unlike on-premises data centers, cloud systems enable every single component of our infrastructures and application systems to be inventorized and accounted for with the use of cloud services APIs. Besides knowing what we have, we also need to know how our systems and users are behaving and performing in our environment in order to tell the difference between acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, and know when to patch and when to update to keep our software and configurations current. There is an entire suite of services that can be leveraged to fulfill these needs, from logging to monitoring, testing, analysis, and alerting, and even remediations. The row of services icons at the bottoms of these slides are some of these services that you can find in the AWS cloud. With visibility, there are many things that we can do to reduce exposures and therefore reduce risk. At a minimum, we should protect our systems against known threats such as DDoS, malware, and intrusion attempts. AWS Shield's Advanced and Guard Duty are two essential active defense mechanisms for this. Using the AWS well-architected framework, we can design and build security and reliability as part of the application architectures to secure by default, reducing the attack surface area and increasing resiliency to attacks and other failures events. Another important tool that the cloud provides is automation, which we should again leverage as much as possible, and we'll discuss more about this later. Let's dive slightly deeper into how we can increase resiliency. Traditionally, disaster recovery is the means to deal with system failures by building additional data centers to manage the contingencies. In practice, secondary data centers tends to be lag behind primary data centers in terms of their compute, storage, and networking capacity, unless the organization is willing to multiply its spending every time when there is a need for new capacity in the primary side. Over time, the capacity gap will grow wider, and when the primary side is completely shut down due to a major incident, the secondary side will only be able to handle a portion of the workloads. As a result, application performance will deteriorate, and when we think about resiliency, we want to go beyond simple notion of disaster recovery and data backups, enabling application workloads to scale up or down depending on the business demands and ensuring applications data are highly available based on its functional and user requirements. Resiliency requirements are normally expressed in terms of recovery time objective, RTO, and recovery point objective, RPO. So the recovery time objective denotes the time it takes for the business to get back to business, operational again, with all essential systems and networks restored to the states before the disaster event. RPO, on the other hand, denotes the level of tolerance for losses, how recent you have to restore your data to before the disaster event. These requirements are determined by answering questions such as what problems are the application addressing, which applications are mission critical, which applications have a lower business impact and therefore can afford a longer downtime, and what specific aspects of applications require specific level of availability. The answers to these questions would then allow for prioritizations of applications based on their criticality and impact to the business, and work out specific resiliency metrics, such as the number of nines of availability required. For example, 99.999% of availability or 99.9% of availability. Organizations also consider the issues that will cause, applications to fail and determine the probability of occurrence. Here we have to be careful not to fall into the historical data trap like the Thanksgiving turkey again, through the use of most up-to-date data collected from continuous monitoring. Common causes of failure include operator errors, deployment-induced, load-induced, data-induced, credential expiry, hardware failure, power outage, or other environmental failures. This understanding should fit into the application architecture design for building fault-tolerant applications. For example, using the AWS well-architected framework will elevate an organization's risk of failure with low probability items. Unlike traditional on-premise setup, where the maximum capacity of IT infrastructure and data centers have to be predetermined and built with upfront investment, therefore limiting the application operational and resiliency choices, hyperscale cloud providers like AWS provides a ready-to-use global infrastructure that can be easily leveraged for organizations' operational resiliency needs. AWS global infrastructure is geographically dispersed over 5 continents with 77 availability zones, AZs, in 24 regions. The AZs, which are physically separated and independent of each other, are built with highly redundant networking to withstand local disruption. Each region consists of 2 or more AZs and are isolated from each other, meaning that a disruption in one region does not result in contagions in other regions. Within each AZ, services are built using a cell-based architectures to ensure highest availability. And when a service fails for some reason, it fails at the cell level, minimizing its blast radius and ensuring other cells are not affected. A rough analogy of this is a set of watertight bulkheads on a ship. Enough bulkheads appropriately designed can contain water in case the ship's hull is breached and will allow the ship to remain afloat. Applications can leverage by using multi-AZ architecture within a location or a multi-region architecture across multiple geographical distance locations. For example, replicating data and load balancing application workloads using Singapore and Sydney regions to serve customers and user needs in both locations, and at the same time, ensuring maximum operational resiliency. Using automations, organizations can also solve many common failure causes. For example, credential expiry and human error, and achieve a higher availability outcome. Essentially, operational resiliency is determined by the missions of the business application and not simply the data. This figure shows the spectrum of resiliency options that can be achieved with AWS multi-AZ and multi-region architecture. Given the additional costs and complexities required to maintain or restore a mission-critical Tier 1 applications during a disaster event, it is important to accurately assess the tier classifications of applications based on substantial business requirements. Organizations may determine that different periods of downtimes are acceptable for applications in lower tiers, for example, Tier 3 and Tier 4. I have mentioned automation quite a few times earlier. Over here, I will just emphasize a few more key points about automation. Essentially, automations will reduce human interventions and errors. And by coding processes, we are able to validate every single actions taken in the system and take corrective actions proactively. In terms of cybersecurity monitoring and instant response, there are again many things that can be done in the cloud with almost zero cost that is not easily achievable in the physical on-premises environment. For example, we can automatically create snapshots of suspicious instances and place the snapshots in S3 buckets and move it to isolated virtual private cloud, VPC or virtual network. We can quickly isolate a VPC and limit its network connection to reduce its surface area of attack upon detection of suspicious network activities in the virtual network. Using AWS auto-scaling, we can maintain optimum application performance and availability even when workloads and periodic, unpredictable, or continuously changing. When workloads are unpredictable or continuously changing. Whatever contingency plan and resiliency architectures we have, they will remain theoretical if they are not stressed or tested. To be able to respond effectively and reliably, preparations are necessary. This includes establishing the incident response process, who do what and when, and the strategy and resource provisions for containment, mitigations, recovery, and investigations. Individuals need to be educated or trained for their respective role in the entire incident response process. Provisioning may include developing infrastructure code, such as using AWS CloudFormation templates for ready-to-use VPCs for investigation and containment to ensure that things are going to work, or at least find issues in the response plan so that we can fix them before anything goes bad. There should be drills and exercises conducted regularly. This is normally known as games days in the financial industries. In cloud-native companies like Netflix, chaos engineering is used in an ongoing basis to automatically induce failures to the infrastructure components and application systems to ensure that they are able to continue their services despite the disruption. As we read the news and learn about the many cyber incidents and failures events, they can be overwhelmingly depressing and at the same time generates tremendous fear, which can have a crippling effect and deter us from moving forwards with our digitizations and business transformation initiatives. Fear was not to be feared because of the miseries it creates. The things we fear pale in comparison to the damage we do to ourselves and others when we unthinkingly scramble to avoid them. A cyber attack or a disaster is bad. A panic is worse. A tough situation isn't helped by terror, it only makes things harder. And that's why we must resist it and reject it if we wish to turn the situation around. Public cloud has over the last decade proven to be able to deliver highly secure and resilient services to both commercial and public sector organizations. Cybersecurity is not a new challenge. It has been challenging because we are dealing with a constantly changing environment. The cloud is a managed environment, unlike the internet. With the use of Amazon Cloud Services, organizations can be better equipped to defend, detect, and respond to cybersecurity risks and ensure operational resiliency in their digital endeavors.